designed specifically to be used predominantly by a technologist. The output of the app is designed to then be transmitted electronically, I might add, HIPAA compliant, to a radiologist, who then says yes, no, or yes under the following methodology, go ahead and scan, and then that is then implemented clinically. So it's here to help tie together the MR medical director, MR safety officer, MR safety expert triumvirate approach that we've had since November of 2016, MR-MD, MR-SO, MR-SE, into clinical care. And we're not expecting the technologist to make any decisions. A decision, a risk-benefit decision, is something that is allocated to the physician who's licensed to practice in that state, and she or he is going to have to make that end final decision. But once the information is provided to them, the technologist will simulate the environment they're about to put the patient into. Once that information is then provided to the radiologist, they can review the data, they can review the facts, they can say this is fine, this is not fine, or if you do the following and limit SAR or what have you, then go ahead and do it and then send that back to the technologist who can then implement as per those orders. So it's meant to be part of the team approach as to how to scan and whether or not you should scan in assessing patient care for patients, predominantly patients with implants, devices, or foreign bodies. So there are multiple rooms. We won't go into detail on all of them. It's a massive app, so let's just focus on the important aspects of it. There are 5 rooms. There's a waiting room. 4 rooms. There's a waiting room, there's an implant room, there's an operating room, and there's an MRI room. The concept is that when the technologist walks in the morning, they turn on the scanner, and then they go to the waiting room to bring their first patient into the scanner. So the intent is to have them use the app before the patients get there. For example, you look at tomorrow's schedule. Let's see. Tomorrow I have Joe Smith. Joe Smith is 5'9" and is 187 pounds, and they have a piece of shrapnel in their right elbow. And he's here for a head MRI for headaches. So they'll then enter. You don't have to put in any HIPAA information if you want to just use it for teaching and for learning. You don't need to enter any HIPAA information. If your institution wants you to use it as a HIPAA compliant hardware, you can do that as well. But you enter 3 things it needs for simulation: gender, height, weight. So you enter 5'9", male, 187 pounds, and it will then generate that patient for you. So here's a patient that is 154.3 pounds. I must have entered 70 kilogram, and 1 meter and 80 centimeters tall. So this patient, male, looks like this. This is the app's assessment of what that patient looks like. And it's a 3D environment, as I told you. So again, this is the 3D appearance of that patient. And you can fine tune it. So if you say the patient is, the patient's a lot heavier than that. So you can change the dimensions if you want to and make the patient heavier, or you can make the patient lighter. You can make them stronger. You can take different parts. If it's a female, you can have, she's in her 7th month of pregnancy, and you can change that. So you fine tune the patient to as an approximation, a rough approximation of what that patient will look like. That's going to be on your schedule for 3 o'clock the next day. After you've got the patient where you think it essentially mimics the body habitus of the patient you're about to scan the next day, you go to the implant room. This patient has a piece of shrapnel. The patient has an aneurysm clip. The patient has a deep brain stimulator, whatever they have, or it could be multiple, of course. You go to the implant room, grab that implant, and then you go into the operating room. And in the operating room, the patient shows up, and you can make any part of that patient transparent, invisible, translucent, or fully opaque. And you can say, let's make that, it's a pacemaker. Let's grab the pacemaker, and you just drag it and drop it to the position in that patient's body to mimic what's going on in the patient the next day. So here's your patient the next day. I forgot what it was. Shrapnel in the right elbow. You grab a piece of shrapnel metal. It's labeled as metal. You drop it into the guy's right elbow. Now you take that patient to the last room, and that's the room that really counts, the MRI room. So when you go into the MRI room, the active patient is following you at all times. So now you're in the MRI room, and the patient you've just defined who has shrapnel in their right elbow or whatever is now in your MRI room. And in this room, you pick whichever scanner that we have.
How cool is that? That's what I'm saying. It's so user-friendly. And I feel like you've thought of everything with this one.
It's nice.
Well, it's not me that's thought of everything, because you have to remember that who am I asking to help me define what we need? I'm asking technologists. I'm asking radiologists. I'm asking physicists. There are parts of this app that are specifically designed for the physicist. There are parts of the app that are specifically designed for the radiologist. And the majority of the user interface is designed for the technologist. So it's the feedback from the end users that helps us determine how we created the interface. So now you're in the MRI room, and you can pick whatever magnet that it models. We model a few dozen. In fact, right now, General Electric just told us that we're up to about 85 to 90% of their installed base worldwide is now modeled in this app.
Coils as well?
85 to 90% of their worldwide installed base models
scanners
are, you can choose from amongst them and pick them, and it'll be in the app and available.
What vendors do you have on there? Just curious.
We have right now GE, we have Hitachi, we have Philips. We do not have Siemens, we do not have Canon at this point. And I don't know about how many Phonars are out there. I don't have Phonar here either. There may be some Phonar systems that are operating. I don't have Phonar modeled either at this stage. So, but of the ones that when you do go into the room and you say, I'd like to change the scanner, if you pick GE, these are the GE scanners that you can pick from. And the same thing applies to any other system. If you want to pick a different competitor's scanner or whatever, you can pick whatever scanner is modeled and bring them into that room. And again, with 5 cubic millimeter accuracy, the dimensions, the fields, everything you're going to see comes from the manufacturers. They provide the data about their scanners, and we then massage it and present it in a way that we think is acceptable for the end users to work with.
So when you say that information, you're talking about all that, the EM fields that we were just talking about, right? With your spatial gradient, your RF gradient, and then your static field, right? That's the information you're talking about that is supplied by the vendors? Nice.
All the fields and energies that we're about to show, and it's going to be color-coded, and you'll be able to see how strong the fields are in different locations in that bore and different locations in the room. All that information is provided directly by the vendors of the scanners.
You collaborated with them. That's awesome.
That is nice.
Right. I think the truth is the miracle of the app is not the graphics. It's not the equations. It's not the science behind it. It's the companies. It's that the manufacturers ever trusted us enough to say, yes, we want to get this information out there so that people can do it safely.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the strongest part of the entire app, is the companies wanting to work together in collaboration with the end users to make it more understandable and more safe for the patients in the end.
For sure. Plus, I think it's important to kind of integrate the two. So I think that's awesome.
That is amazing.
The environment, as I said, is 3D, so everything you see in front of you can be manipulated. Like we can rotate this around. It's a completely 3D environment. And one of the things that we do for teaching purposes is that we can make the magnet or parts of the magnet visible or invisible. So if we take the right-hand side of that magnet and we make the plastic outer wall invisible, we sort of revealing that. I made it copper looking. It's not copper, but I just wanted to have you thinking of that as you looked at that reflective surface as if it's wires. That's the magnet coil. And inside that are the gradient coils. And you can see why they could be called thumbprint or fingerprint coils as well.
Right.
And for our audience that aren't as wise to the physics of MRI, it's the gradient coils that make the most of the loud noises that you hear as a patient.
The noise that we hear is coming from the gradients being activated and deactivated, turned on, reversed in the presence of a powerful magnetic field. That's correct. So one magnet in the presence of another suddenly appearing magnetic field, they try to align relative to this powerful field, and that's the torque that you're hearing is the vibration as we do that tens of thousands of times per second. Inside that is a body coil, an RF coil. Inside that is the inner plastic, and inside that, of course, would be where the patient is. So if we take this patient now and let's position him for a brain study. So we turn the lasers on and we put it to, I always like to say canthomeatal line because it's just about the only thing I can do, and everything else I'm inept at. So I just hit set. So we just set that to be the center. Now I say move. So now the patient's being advanced to the scan now. Now that means that this patient is now being advanced so that the position of that patient is exactly what you established as 0 it moves that to the theoretical 0 center point of your scanner. So now the patient's in there, but where are the fields? Well, they're invisible. That's why we call this MagnetVision, because it's trying to take the invisible and make it visible. So if you look at the scanner now, there's 4 in the image in front of you. There's 4 like a hidden drawer underneath the bottom half of the bottom quarter of that image is a drawer that comes up. Here, I'll make it come up again. So that drawer has 4 different panes. The second pane has all these fields in it. B0 field, I'm going to press on that right now, and that's the static magnetic field. And this is three-dimensionally, this is the static magnetic field color-coded of that MR scanner. So where it's red, it's 1.5 Tesla in this example, and where it's higher than, when it's white, it's higher than 1.5. Where it's yellow, green, or blue, it's lower than 1.5. And this is the three-dimensional spatial distribution of that static magnetic field. This is predominantly responsible for translation, that things flying in, but actually more so for torque, things rotating.
Right.
The predominant energy responsible for things flying in, translation, the missile effect, the projectile effect, is actually not the field strength, ironically. It's how rapidly the field changes in space. If I have a wrench and the whole wrench is exposed to 3 Tesla and I let go, it's just going to fall. It's not going to go anywhere, but if there's gravity, it'll fall down, because it has no reason to go one way or the other. But if the same wrench is exposed to a difference in magnetic field across it, it will move towards the higher field. The greater the flux density, the greater the attraction in that direction, the greater the difference in field between here and here, the greater the pull. And so if you look at the center, you see how red the center is? That's very homogeneous. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It has to be, because as you guys know, we need a homogeneous magnetic field in order to do MRI. Otherwise, you're going to get all kinds of artifacts. So we go to great lengths to try to provide a very homogeneous magnetic field in the center of the bore. But if it's a homogeneous magnetic field, that means that there's no difference. dB, dx, difference in field here versus here is essentially 0. So if I could do not do this at home, if I could theoretically take a crowbar, a wrench made out of iron, into the center of an MR scanner and let go, it's just going to fall. It's so not intuitive, but in the center of that bore, there's no translation. Torque is tremendously strong because it's a very strong magnetic field, but translation is essentially 0 because it's a homogeneous field in the center. Now, as you try to get to the center, oh my gosh, now here it's much stronger than here, and here it's even stronger than here. So that's what makes it translate and head in that direction. So where are the difference in fields, dB, dx? Because that's going to be predominantly telling you the translational forces. To map that out, well, before I do, you invited me for an interview, but may as well give you a test.
We're ready.
This is what I was worried
What's
about.
going to be the what's going to be the translational force? What's going to be the color when I hit dB dx field? The difference in magnetic field, when it's very, very different, it'll be red, purple, white. It'll be blue or invisible if there's no difference. What the red now in the center? What's going to be the dB dx field in the center of the scanner? When I press dB dx, what's it going to show me in the center?
I feel like it's going to be blue.
It's going to be blue or invisible.
Or, yeah,
excellent.
not there.
So this is the dB dx plot of the same machine.
Okay, no more questions. I'm 1 for 1.
You're 1 for 1. It was perfect. So in other words, translation in the center is essentially 0. But look where it's greatest, at the edge of the magnet.
Yeah.
At the edge of remember that magnet that we had before? Let's turn the magnet back on. Remember the magnet?
Yeah.
So at the edge of the magnet is where that field is greatest.
I'm definitely a visual person, and this is...
How excited were you when you thought of this idea and somebody came to you
together
with this model? I can't imagine how thrilled you were.
The excitement was not so much when I thought of it. The excitement was when others first saw it.
Right.
And they seemed to...
It's amazing.
Well, we just first saw this moments before we started this recording, and we were in awe. I can't believe how cool this is.
I've heard about it, but I just wasn't expecting this.
Well, let's just take this as an example. So this is the dBdx. This is the one that's mostly responsible for translational forces, for things getting sucked up into the scanner. Okay? What about the dBdt, the imaging gradients? Remember with those we have supra-inferior, left, right, antero-posterior. There's all three, and they're all 0, 0, 0, the same exact part of a millimeter in space. So the imaging gradients, if you have a 70-centimeter bore, it's about 35 centimeters left and right, 35 centimeters front and back, and 35 centimeters above and below you, approximately, is where they're going to max out, because the seesaw moves the greatest at the ends. So if I now take the same person, put them again laterally, this was B0, this is dBdx, but this is dBdt. If I turn on the imaging gradients, you can see why. It's right in the center of that grading coil is where it maxes it out. Can you see it? Yeah. So the gradients will max out not on the head. I'm doing a chest x-ray, and I'm exposing the chest, and where's the greatest carcinogenic risk? Where I'm not studying. That will be the equivalent in the metaphor I gave you before. I'm scanning a pituitary gland, and where is the greatest risk of neuroexcitation? Outside of the head, away from the area that I'm examining. Extremely not intuitive. But I think in my field, in radiology, I think there's a huge percentage of my coworkers, my colleagues and radiologists and technologists, not the physicists. But for the technologists and for the radiologists, I think a huge percentage of us are very, very visual graphic people. And I could write an equation, or I can plot the equation. It just seems in my decades of experience in the field that radiologists are more comfortable on the plotted side, and physicists are more comfortable on the equation side. And the only value that I have, if I have any value, is that I love to translate, because I love both sides.
And you go back and forth.
So this shows that if this guy has a pacemaker, which, as in a moment I'll show you he does, you're scanning the brain, and where is the greatest red? Right over his chest.
Yeah.
Let me make that patient's skin invisible. Now can you see that red pacemaker?
Yeah.
Almost exactly under where the gradients are maxing out. So if the patient would be further away, then the pacemaker can turn green again. Can you see that? We can also put on these, I call them breadcrumb tracks. These breadcrumbs that it leaves as you move him in, and it shows you that based on the position in space, this patient has multiple implants. He has an aneurysm clip, he has a pacemaker, he has shrapnel, but it leaves breadcrumb tracks as he moves into the scanner, and we say advance him to scan. Each of these implants or devices or foreign bodies is going to leave tracks, and they turn color red, yellow, or green based on the specific energy that you're trying to display. So if you're displaying dBdt at this point, you're showing the gradients. This is showing you the gradients are maxing out in the position, and it turns the implant and the tracks red at those locations. And yellow, if you can see right before it turned red, it means you're approaching, and green means it's quite low and nowhere near a safety threshold. And it can do that for each of the energies. This is for dBdt, this is for B0, this is for dBdx, the spatial field gradient, and the last energy we hadn't talked about yet is the radio frequency energy. This is the plot of the radio frequency energy of a body coil. Oops. Let's get rid of this, move him over here, and magnify it back up. This is the body coil of, what machine are we using again? A 450W GE 1.5 Tesla. These are the RF B1 oscillating magnetic fields in air, unloaded coil. Now, what does that have to do with the electric fields that'll be induced in a patient inside the scanner? Almost nothing. But we have to start from somewhere. If I don't know even what am I irradiating, how am I going to know where the electric fields I'm going to induce are going to be? So people tend to think that the radio frequency exposure is very homogeneous. I dare say, looking at this image, does that look homogeneous to you?
No, not at all.
In fact, maybe this is a good way to end this part of the discussion. Radio frequency energies have several associated potential risks. By far, in my opinion, the predominant one is burns. So let's take this same patient, and instead of looking at him from the side, let's look at him from the top. You know what I'm saying? We're going to look down on this gentleman. And let's make the other side of the magnet now invisible as well, so that we can see the entire patient. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So now I'm looking down at the patient. The whole magnet has been turned invisible on top, and now I'm just going to look straight down at him. Where do you think would be the greatest chance of this patient experiencing a burn?
Well, I know typically it's the most lateral position, but...
What part of this patient do you think is exposed to the greatest B1 oscillating
it looks like
magnet?
his shoulders from here.
Now you understand why shoulder
right?
burns are associated with these studies. With one picture, you instantly can explain to the technologist why you have to take padding seriously. I'm scanning a head. I can get a third-degree burn on the shoulder. What are you talking about?
Right.
Do that with a CT scan.
Right.
That's the whole point we're trying to say. It's multiple energies, but more than that, the energies are not used the way we're used to thinking of them. I don't just shine ultrasound at your liver. Give me my picture. I distribute these energies in such unusual patterns, and the risks are distributed in these unusual locations. It's entirely possible if this person had a wire right now that was in his neck, and the other end of the wire went to his ankle, I can cause a third-degree burn on this guy's ankle. In this position, exactly as you see for a pituitary study. And that's the concept that we're trying to get across, that understanding MR safety is a science. It's truly a science. Those physicians, those technologists, those physicists that have dedicated themselves to actually becoming more knowledgeable, more experienced, more capable in this area, hats off to them. They've literally decided that they're going to turn this into a profession, not just button pushing.
Right.
This is their profession. They truly want to earn the name technologists, understanding the science behind what they're doing so that they can do it safer and more efficiently. To me, it seems that the pictures are worth 1,000 words.
Oh, yeah.
And being able to see that it's an extremely heterogeneous distribution of the energies that we're irradiating makes it easier for them to understand why, if I could just stick something between the white areas where it's so powerful of an exposure, maybe it won't cause a burn. And this is just an average-sized person. Who is more likely to get flush up in the middle of that white area? Morbidly obese, a football player. And that's why they're the ones that experience those type, I call them proximity burns. They experience that more frequently. In fact, since the app, again, once it's in a computer, it doesn't let you leave out steps. So as soon as you enter gender, height, weight, and you pick a scanner, it will automatically warn you. Our calculations suggest that this patient may be at a higher risk for a proximity burn. Be extra careful about padding this patient. It'll even go so far for other gender, heights, and weights. It may say to you, our calculations suggest your patient will not fit into this scanner tomorrow at 3. Maybe you should look for a different scanner to use. Why find that out only after they show up?
Right.
Maybe if we have population defined norms, so that if you look at if we say you have a male and I showed you I can graphically make him fatter. You can do that with a female too, but as you draw the slider and you add weight to a female, the app will not add weight to a female the same way it adds it to a male, because women and men deposit it differently. We have a beer belly, right? Women more at the thighs. So we know that, and we use population norms for how we change the magnitude of that patient's fat distribution, and it'll use that to help guide you and perhaps warn you this patient is going to be at a greater risk for a certain type of burn or maybe too large to fit. Once the data is there, there's almost no end to how you can apply it to more efficiently and safely scanning your patients.
I think the benefits that this provides is undeniable. I mean,
thank you for sharing this.